2025 WNBA Finals presented by YouTube TV. We'll begin with remarks from Commissioner Cathy Engelbert, and then we'll turn it over to question and answer. Please have.
What if you were given a golden ticket to mainstream prominence, a key that might open a billion-dollar future, and you just refused to turn it? The WNBA was in just that situation. Caitlin Clark, a cultural phenomenon and generational talent, was the league's key. And while the whole world watched for the first time, Cathy Engelbert, the league's commissioner, witnessed a move that was so cruel and perplexing that it left millions of fans, both new and old, wondering in horror. Is the WNBA deliberately attempting to undermine its own success? The league has battled for every bit of media attention, every dollar in sponsorship, and every fan in the seats for decades. Then a single player showed up and overnight altered the whole equation. This was more than a single position on a basketball team's roster. This concerned a turning point that may shape women's athletics for the next 20 years, and the decision has sparked an ongoing whirlwind of discussion, controversy, and unadulterated rage. The truth of what really transpired in the WNBA's corporate offices and behind the closed doors of Indiana Fever basketball is more stunning, more political, and exposes a far deeper issue than anybody could have predicted. When a force of nature unlike anything the sport had ever seen onto the court. It all started. Caitlin Clark was more than simply a basketball player in college. She was a walking, talking revolution in trainers, a cultural tidal wave. Her Iowa Hawkeyes games not only set viewing records for women's basketball, they destroyed all basketball records, whether they were for men or women. Her last thrilling collegiate performance in the 2024 NCAA Women's Championship game attracted an astounding 24 million viewers with an average of 18.9 million. It was the most viewed basketball game of any sort in the U.S. in 5 long years. To put that figure into stark perspective, more people watched it than the NBA Finals that year. More people watched it than the World Series championship games or the latter rounds of the Masters. The American public's message was as loud and plain as a stadium buzzer. They want to see Caitlin Clark play basketball, not just basketball in general. And that enormous, enthusiastic crowd followed her straight to the WNBA when the historically troubled Indiana Fever unavoidably selected her first overall. The league, which had struggled for 25 years to overcome the notion that it was a niche sport, was all of a sudden and mysteriously the most sought-after event in town. With an average of 2.1 million viewers, Caitlin Clark's professional debut game on ESPN2 was the most viewed game in the league in more than 20 years. In order to accommodate the tens of thousands of fans, many of whom were first-time WNBA attendees clamoring to catch a glimpse of her signature logo three-point shots, teams used to playing in quiet, half-empty arenas were rushing to move their home games against the Indiana Fever to massive NBA stadiums. Within an hour of the draft, fanatics sold out of her number 22 jersey. Not only was it a bestseller, but it sold more than every player's jersey from every other club in the league put together. She was a one-woman economic stimulus package. And because of the security risks and logistical nightmares of flying the most famous female athlete in the world on commercial flights, the league had to address the long-dated issue of chartering private flights for teams. There was a Caitlin Clark effect. It was the largest contribution the league had ever received, and it was measurable. However, although sponsors, fans, and TV networks were ecstatic about her presence, a very different and far more antagonistic mood was developing inside the league among the same players who stood to gain from her notoriety. The public was shown the red carpet, but behind the scenes, a harsh bordering on sadistic welcome was being painstakingly planned. Caitlin Clark's targeting was brutally evident from the first possession in her maiden game. She was subjected to significantly more physical abuse than is customary for rookie hazing or the welcome to the league moments that are necessary part of being a top draft selection. She was routinely and alarmingly hip-checked, shoulder-checked, elbowed, and knocked to the ground. The umpires often failed to call a foul as if they were also participating in this unspoken test. The seasoned players in the league seemed to have reached a quiet agreement to put her to the test, shatter her, and demonstrate that the WNBA was a different animal and that her collegiate fame was meaningless. However, one particular occurrence blew the lid off the whole thing and made the world aware of the unadulterated hatred aimed at her. Alyssa Thomas was waiting for the ball to go inbound during a nationally broadcast game versus the Phoenix Mercury. Caitlin Clark was standing close by, uninvolved in the activity, and not protecting Alyssa Thomas. Caitlin Clark was sent falling to the hardwood floor by Alyssa Thomas's nasty, unexpected shoulder check and verbal abuse. There was nothing to do in terms of basketball. It was a deliberate act of hostility away from the ball, an obvious cheap shot. The referee's decision to rule it a common foul was so blatantly incorrect that the league management had to intervene and retrospectively elevate it to a flagrant 1 foul after the game due to the intense public uproar. The response was much more revealing than the occurrence itself. In a revealing silence at her post-game news conference, Alyssa Thomas declined to respond to any questions on it. What is even more unsettling is that Caitlin Clark's collegiate competitor, teammate AIA Wilson, was seen on tape jumping up from the bench and cheering the violent behavior. It was more than simply a strong defense. This was a private matter. The millions of fans who followed Caitlin Clark received this message as well. Your new favorite, the one you believe will rescue this league, does not belong here. This simmering animosity on the court was just the outward manifestation of a far bigger and more significant struggle taking place behind closed doors. A struggle of power and egos that would result in a decision so startling that it would absolutely astound the sports world. A huge international basketball tournament was approaching as the turmoil on the floor continued to escalate. The 2024 Paris basketball tournament, representing a nation on a global scale, is the ultimate